Hi everyone and welcome for this new tutorial about the Heroquest project, and today we are going to paint the kind of human fish into the box, and I'm going to enjoy painting this in 3 different levels. For the beginner with some simple quick step with speed paint. For the middle, I'm going to push a little bit more the level just with my brush, and at the end we are going to paint in some different way by using brush, airbrush, and mixing all to have something the best we can. I really hope you are going to enjoy this tutorial. Remember to like this video and comment if you have any question or just to give me your feedback. Always you can support me on Patreon. Remember to have access to more content and to help me developing my channel. So let's go for the tutorial. So I just start by prime everything in white, and after I'm going to apply 2 different speed paints, the plasmatic bolts and after that the magic blue, and I'm going to try to push the magic blue at the end of every part of my creature, just to push some bestial effects on the mini. So that will be the first time I try to use this methods directly with some speed paint, so we can see, we are going to see if that works or not. So remember, it's always better, so I have some paper, some glass paper, but the best way when you use some ink is to have some part in plastic or metal to put your ink, because now the ink is going to be dry pretty quickly, more than if I use some plastic or metal surfaces to put my paint before I apply on the miniatures. So I changed my palettes by a metallic one, so the paint will be more fresh, more longer. And now I'm going to apply on all the ends of the different parts of my paint some magic blue to create some degradé in fresh part. So it's going to make some transition more quickly, more easily. That can be a pretty useful techniques. So when you use this kind of methods, you need to remember, you need to apply the new paint during the time the previous paint is already wet, so it's going to mix between both of them at the extremity right here, and that's going to create your transition in the best way you can. Sometimes the minis from Heroquest is a little bit too some kind of oil. It seems very weird, and the paint is not necessarily going to be fixed very quickly, so I don't hesitate to apply very strongly and make it again if necessary. So when the paint is totally dry, I can continue the next step. Just before, I'm going to show you how I remove the plastic when it's a little bit strange and not right away. So I'm going to use an hair dryer, and after I'm going to apply, and when it's very hot, I'm going to move and fix this movement just to have something totally clean. So now I'm going to apply on all the metallic parts some sun golem to have some classic base to do some copper effect. So just for you as reminder, when you apply some speed paint or some kind of contrast paint, you need to apply in the most strong way to reach all the different surfaces in 1 or 2 steps, no more, just to be sure the layer will be totally clean and enough strong to don't have to come back on later. When I do some mistake, I just come back with a pretty clean brush, just with some few water, and I try to remove a little bit, like that. So now I'm going to come back with hardened laser, some speed paint color again, and I'm going to apply on all the different closes. And by the way, at last, I'm going just to apply some black on the eyes and on the base to have something pretty clean and ready to play. So I'm going to see that it's too similar between my 2 different color right here, and I'm not a good visibility, so I'm going to wait that will be totally dry and come back with 1 more layer with another color, just to create a clear distinction between my armor and the different laser part. So I'm going to apply some black on the teeth and on the eyes and on the base, just to finish that. So, as we see previously, I'm not necessarily fan of this part because it's not necessarily enough different. So I'm going to use more dark wood on all the middle parts to create a clear distinction between my armor and the laser part. And for that, I'm going to just apply on all the miniatures. Remember, when I paint miniatures for play, I'm going to paint on all the different sets, or 2 or 3 miniatures, just to have you can apply my paint and let it dry. During all the process, I'm going to apply on all the different miniatures, and when I come back on the first one, so the paint will be totally dry and I can continue painting on the first one. So in that way, I'm going to apply this dark wood on that, and I will have finished the first step to have pretty cool and pretty clean miniatures ready to play. So I just come back on the first model, just to have the same kind of color and something really more dark, to have some clear distinction between the laser and the different metallic part. So here is the results after the basing with the speed paint. It's ready to play, but for this level 2, we are going to push our highlight on the different elements, and I'm going to show you that step by step. So I'm going to start by highlighting all the flesh part, and because it's a more present element on the miniatures, and for that I'm going to use this color to pushing my highlight on every green part. So I check my brush into the bottle of water, and after I take my paint and I'm going to apply this paint on every part where I'm going to take the more light. When I dilute my paint, I try to have something where I'm going to have the consistency of milk, so it's going to be not necessarily very covering, but just enough to let the previous step always visible, but enough to cover just a little bit to push my highlight everywhere I want. Remember to use a lot the side of your brush so you can push more easily on very large surfaces. By using the end of your brush only, you are going to let more line on your paint, and you will need more time to apply on all the different surfaces. So remember to use a lot the side of your brush and push your color in the direction you want the more color. So I'm going to do the same on the different parts of flesh, and I'm going to use some turquoise just to push my highlight on every blue part. So remember to have some consistency like milk, so we are going to push this highlight on the blue part. So after this first highlight, I'm going to apply a second highlight directly with white on different points of highlight on all the different flesh parts, but only the part where we're going to take the more light. And by the way, I'm going to use the white in the same way to highlight just a few the black part, just to be sure to have some very clear and net highlight. Remember to focus on some few parts with your white, so it's going to pushing the eyes of people who are going to look your miniatures directly on the part you want. For example, right now I'm going to apply again and again on all the different more highlight part, but I'm going to focus on the middle of my miniatures just to be sure people is going to see first this part, the middle of my miniatures. You can always add some few points on the end of the end, but as you can see, it's going to be very some few points, nothing too strong. So remember, this is going just to highlight just a few, the eyes and the teeth. You can always put some points at the end, even on the blue part of the mini. So remember to just put some few line and few points, no more. So now we are going to paint and pushing our highlight again, but this time on the copper part. And for that I'm going to use some barbarian flesh, and after just some few barbarian flesh and white to pushing our highlight. So remember, when you do non-metallic metal, to pushing a lot of light on the edges. That's going to create a strong contrast. We're going to give us this non-metallic metal effect, will be more real. So we continue by mixing some white into our barbarian flesh, and we are going to push this on the edges, just to be sure to have very strong contrasts. I'm going to do the same later, just with pure white. The more we are going to paint, less we are going to reach surfaces. So now I'm just with some white. So now we just come back into the shadow with some Dumbull brown to finish this non-metallic metal in copper. By the way, we can always come back with some few black to pushing again a little bit more our contrast. Just to finish this level 2, I'm going to come back on the laser of the miniatures just with some flat earth from Prince August, just to pushing a little bit more highlight because this part is really dark, and that's going to be enough for this level 2 painting. So we can push just a few more highlight by adding a little bit of white and pushing on the different edges some few points of highlights on the laser. So we can repeat this process with a little bit more white if we want a few more highlights on this laser. You can always stop before this step or just a little bit later if you want to add more highlight on the laser part. So for this third step, I'm going to use only my airbrush to clean all the non-metallic metal parts in copper with some barbarian flesh. I'm going to use these two colors for the flesh of my miniatures, and at the end I'm going to use some desert yellow on all the different laser on the mini. So I start by making my mix for my airbrush directly on my palette by mixing some acrylic thinner and my barbarian flesh color, and I'm going to put that directly in my airbrush. And now, as you can see, I continue to clean my transition with my airbrush just by pushing my highlight a little bit more directly with my barbarian flesh. Remember to push some few layers and to make turn your minis in order to reach only the surfaces you want. And now I'm going to do the same things with some toxic mists I already showed you during the beginning of this tutorial. So this step is going to help us to clean the different surfaces to have something very more smooth. And now I'm going to do the same things with some ocean depth from Army Painter again. This color is just perfect to create the transition between the two different colors of my skin. So now I'm going to make the same things on the leather with the desert yellow. I do the same things on the 3 different models, but I don't need to refill my airbrush because it's not going to use a lot of paint. One last few steps with my airbrush is going to come with some black directly to push more contrast on some few elements. For example, I'm going to come on some few hands of some few elements, and by the way, on the non-metallic metal. So now we are going to add some verdigris effect on all the copper part. For the verdigris effect, I'm going to add some layer of scaly green and adding step by step more ivory inside to create the verdigris effect. So we are going to push this verdigris effect more into the different recesses, and the part we are going to take less light, so parts we are going to see more humidity. You can do different layer to have something more strong. As you can see, it's very diluted. So when my first layer is totally dry, I come back with a mix between a little bit of ivory and my green, and I'm going to tap my color to create my second layer. Remember to reduce the surfaces you are going to reach during this process to be sure to see always the previous step. So we are going to add a little bit more ivory again, and in some very few parts I'm going to tap again to create more contrast and more effect on this part. So now we are going to come back on the leather with some dark sea blue for the shadow and with some few ivory directly to create some texture on the leather. We are going to apply some very thin layer of dark sea blue, but the most important thing is to push it into the more strong shadow part and the very strong recesses to create our shadow effects.
By the way, I can always use it to push between two different surfaces, like between the laser and the legs, for example. And now with my ivory, I'm going to create my different, more strong highlight. And by the way, I'm going to create some line from one side and another side, just to show the different textures, the life, and the different damage would take by this laser. These kind of methods can be pretty cool and pretty useful, because with some few line and some few points, you are going to give really more life to your miniatures. If you don't find a way to make it in just one time, don't hesitate to make it and make it again, just to step by step have some and more thin line on your miniatures. So now we are going to use some red, some Evil Sun's Scarlet, and after that some Trollslayer Orange, and probably just a few white to pushing some details on some few points. So I dilute a lot my red. I'm going to push my layer on the different part I want to paint. And now I come back with some orange directly on the starfish and the coral. As you can see on the miniatures, I come back with my layer of red, just a few on the membrane and under the eyes and into the mouth. So I will come back just with a few white into some red, or directly I'm going to use directly some barbarian flesh. That will be more easy, like that, just to apply some few highlights on the membrane and into the mouth.
So I really hope you enjoy this tutorial. I'm going to hope that you are going to apply this tutorial from your side. I'm going to show you for the next step the Chaos Warriors. There are 4 in the box, and I not necessarily really enjoy painting it, but I hope you are going to enjoy to see how I paint it. So let's go and see you very soon for the next tutorial. Bye bye.